Hey there, welcome to Brave Talks. I'm Emily Nolan. Today on the show we have three girlfriends of mine who went to high school with me, and they're here to share their experience being a Black woman and BIPOC woman in our culture. I learn a lot in this episode and talk a little, sharing the mic with my three good girlfriends. Rachel takes over the show. She is a podcast host of Mommifaceted. And my girlfriend Dorian, I grew up with. We played softball together. And Stephanie went to high school with me. So I wanted to share their experiences, but also just listen and learn from their experiences and empathize, have more empathy for their experiences. One thing that we learn in this show, one thing that I learned in this show is how important it is to stay accountable and keep our community accountable, whether it's redlining school districts or evaluating the diversity of my friendships, my working relationships, and my children's friendships and relationships. And I do leave with one really important action item for me. I hope it inspires you, and I'll share the action item at the end of the show. So thanks for listening, and I really am so grateful to share this episode with you. It's very near and dear to my heart.
Thank you so much, Emily, for allowing us to have this conversation. I think it's very good just to talk about it, just to kind of get our experiences and our thoughts out. And so I appreciate you letting us all take over. And that's what we're going to do, is just share our experiences, and we'll get you in on the conversation as well. So first, I wanted to kind of start with Stephanie and just let us know your background, a little bit of, in talking about race and just being a Black female growing up. What are some of the things that you kind of remember growing up about either having a talk with your parents about these things or experiencing any issues yourself personally? Just, kind of just an overview, general idea of some of the personal things that you've experienced as a Black woman.
Oh, well, I'm actually biracial. I'm Puerto Rican and Black too. So I had a little bit of an interest in growing up because my mom's side is all Puerto Rican, and it's really beautiful because Puerto Ricans come in all different shades. My grandpa is actually darker than I am, and then my grandma is lighter than I am too. So it was interesting seeing, my grandfather, who was full-blood Puerto Rican, even had some discrimination against him because he looked more Black, and even within the Puerto Rican community. So that was super interesting, but I really appreciated seeing how he handled everything, and also just all the things he's done. We're from New York too, so I actually my parents were divorced at a young age, and I was born in Philly, and I didn't honestly see my dad for a while, and I saw him up until I was 10. And he would always get me Black Barbie dolls and everything, and really try to just show how beautiful being Black is. And unfortunately, my mom got remarried. She married a white gentleman, and I think that's really when I had a lot of identity issues. I had a lot of self-hate. It was just really sad to just see how, I really came from such a beautiful background, and then kind of just having no dad in the picture, how that really hurts your self-worth. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask, I know that a lot of Emily's audience are mothers, and, they're kind of doing this journey as, adults, also having to worry about, what are their kids seeing and noticing. And so I would love to know if you realized as a child that there was something different, as your mom remarried and you lost that bit of your that connection to your culture. Did you realize that as a child, is that a thing that you, looking back now, you've noticed it?
Oh, definitely. it's kind of sad because like at 3 or 4, I knew my dad cheated on my mom. I remember vividly like my mom holding a picture of somebody. I didn't know who it was, but I just remember her crying, and like then I never saw my dad again and everything kind of thing, or we didn't live with him anymore. So it definitely affected me. And then like I don't think my stepdad being around like affected me as much like as I noticed when I was little. But growing up and like looking back at everything, there were comments he said about like just being scared of Black people and just like hating on my actual dad and like saying how he was never there and everything. It really like was just putting in these little thoughts and seeds in my mind that I just didn't ever really think about until I was older, and just looking back on my life being like, wow, no wonder why I had so much self-hate, or, you know, and just having 2 different ethnicities in my house too. I feel like with, I remember when I stopped relaxing my hair, my grandpa was like, oh, why did you do that kind of thing? Because he was so, he came from like the hood, like he grew up in parts of, I'm trying to think, not Brooklyn, but he grew up in like the Harlem and everything, and then basically worked his way, and like truly an American dream, like really worked his way from there to living in an all white neighborhood where people were moving out when he moved in kind of thing. And like just him like kind of wearing a mask to fit in with his, you know, his colleagues and everything. And for me to go against that, like after all the work that he did to like kind of fit in with his white coworkers, and then for me to be like, no, I'm gonna wear my hair natural and this is what grows out of my hair, he was just kind of like weirded out at first. And that's when I like was like, oh, even within our Puerto Rican family, there's a little bit of hate towards darker skin and everything too. So it's just interesting.
Great, good. Yeah, I appreciate those experiences. I think it definitely can give other people who may not have had that a view of these are the little things that we kind of think about, or, you know, we kind of have these situations that come across that, you know, are normal for us, but maybe not for other people. So just to kind of give that eye-opening viewpoint is great. And so Dorian, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the growing up that you and I had, just, you know, from your experience, any situations, you were an athlete growing up, and so, you know, maybe even that situations that have come up where you felt different or outside, or, you know, just having to have that balance of being a Black person in a world where you may be the minority. So what are some of the things that you remember just growing up?
Yeah, so, you know, Rachel and I, well, all of us attended a primarily white high school, like elementary school through high school. Like I was just on a Zoom call a week ago, and I said, I haven't had to worry about how to interact with people who are different than me because I've been doing it my whole life, right? So growing up in a primarily white middle to upper middle class area, afforded us a lot of benefits, right? We went to a great school, we had access to really good education, but at the same time, we were alienated in a sense in some of the things that we did. And kudos to our parents, like we went to a Black church, you know, we were as immersed in Black culture as we could be. We celebrated Kwanzaa, right? Like our parents made sure that we had access and exposure to those things. But, you know, like Rachel mentioned, I was an athlete, I played softball. Softball is a sport with a high barrier to entry through cost, right? Equipment is expensive, travel is expensive, the fees for teams are expensive. So compared to track or basketball or soccer or some of those other sports, softball is really, really expensive. You know, for those of you who don't know, right now, softball bats are like $450. Like you can't play a game without a bat, you know, and a glove is $200 and you can't play a game without a glove. So there's a much smaller percentage of women playing softball who look like us. So for a lot of times, I was the only Black person on my team, probably from about when I stopped playing with my sister at like 10 years old to when I got to be about 16 years old. I was the only Black woman, Black athlete on my team. And then I got on a team there were 3 of us, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Like you can relate when it starts to rain in the middle of the game and your hair is straight and now all of a sudden you look crazy in the 4th inning, or what are you going to do? Like my hair was in braids all summer long because I just couldn't play and deal with my hair and go to my appointment and be on top of like how I looked and how I presented myself, and just small things like that our white counterparts don't have to think about, right? That we have to think about. So like picture day for the team, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's picture day. Why didn't you give me a week notice? Like I'm not ready, just things that people might not understand about how we feel like we have to be portrayed, right? It wasn't okay in my mind to show up to team picture day without my hair done because all of my teammates were going to have their hair done. And it might've taken them 10 minutes to do what took me an hour, so just being in an environment where there were people who understood what it felt like to be the only Black person on a team, or to be somebody's only Black friend, right? Like that was something that I got a lot of in high school. Was I was their only Black friend, and I didn't think of it at the time as something that was limiting to me or to them, because those were my options, right? Like I had a handful of options of Black people to be friends with in high school. And if it wasn't those handful of people, then my friends were largely white. But thinking now about how little I spoke up, right? Like about when they made jokes or they made comments about big lips or big butts or, things being ghetto or whatever, like to me, that was just the normal. It didn't seem to me like something that I needed to address or something that I had the position to address, I guess. I heard another young woman recently say like she has never felt more comfortable having those tough conversations with her white friends than she does now, right? It's a national and global topic of conversation that we have never felt comfortable to have, right? Like I know Emily cares for me. Emily and I have been friends for decades, and never probably prior to now have I felt okay saying like, this is why I struggle as a Black person. And it's not because I didn't think she cared about me or that I don't care about her, but just having that freedom of like the Band-Aid's been ripped off, right? And now we can have those conversations that we've been holding on to for 20 years is something that I'm experiencing like as an adult that I didn't feel like I was able to do as a child or as even like a teenager or a young adult.
I also think I'm going to butt in here because
I was just going to come to you.
I'm like dying.
Go on ahead.
Yeah.
You were next.
Thank you. So one of the things too, Dorian, is that I grew up in, I guess, my mom's generation, where my mom is a fierce advocate for women, for people of color, for anybody who, needs support. And I think I grew up in this, like, with this guiding star that, like, I don't see color. And the truth is that kind of bothers me now, because I'm starting to understand that even though that's how we feel, like I don't feel any different about you than I do to a white friend, because you're my sister and we grew up together and we played sports together. And I got to, initiate you into high school softball. I think that it's important that we acknowledge that we're not colorblind, and that by acknowledging this, we're able to pave the way and have these conversations. Because I grew up believing that it wasn't important to see color, and it wasn't important to even say the word Black. Like I didn't feel like I could say that, and I still like work my way through that, because I grew up feeling there wasn't ever a divide between us. And like when we talk about us and them, like I feel even now it's weird, but the truth is, by acknowledging that you guys have different experiences, it's powerful, because we're able to pave the way for future generations, for our generation, and to equalize and pave this more level field for everyone and normalize it. So I just wanted to share that like we're having this conversation now because it is conversation globally, at least in the United States. And I'm just so grateful that we can have this conversation, because it's so important to acknowledge that there is a difference, and we're working to like bridge the gap and work together.
I think
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was going to ask you about, yeah, if you had any kind of conversations growing up, or was it some, how was it addressed in your family? And that's a perfect example of one way. One of my coworkers mentioned last week that in her family, they, try to raise their children to grow up to be good people. And that's great. And that's obviously the goal, but being good people is not the issue. It's not that, we are bad people, or that there's, everyone we come across as bad people. The issue is that we are different. And there are some things that, Black people have to deal with, that Latino people have to deal with, that, Indian American people have to deal with. And the reality of it is that these are conversations that we just need to have, regardless of, whether we feel like, we're close friends or we are sisters. Those things are just, they just are. And so that's definitely why we're all excited to be having this conversation on Brave Talk. Dorian, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the visibility is paramount, right? Especially when you're talking about young preteens and people who are coming into their identity stage, right? Where they may be struggling with some self-hate, right? Or other kind of condescending thoughts about their own skin or their own background, their culture, things like that. The visibility, in my opinion, is the most important thing, right? Being able to see people who look like you doing what you want to do, or see people who look like you embracing who they are and embracing the skin that they're in, and being able to create some proximity, right? So if you are a white family that has white children and your son or your daughter plays on a sports team with a Black player, right? Maybe you guys go to post-game meals with that person's family so that your kids are in proximity with people who don't look like them, right? Providing those opportunities to put them in that situation allows them to have the capacity for empathy, to have the ability to see and understand what's going on, and then to be engaged, right, as we move into the next frontier of social and political change. So understanding that, like, now I look back and I'm like, well, my dad always had our softball team over my house and they got to see how we lived, and I didn't realize how important that was until now, right? Being able to say, like, we're not so different, but we are different, and here's how, and here's why, and here's how those things are great. Being able to see that Black people are not a threat. Not only are they not a threat, we're a lot more alike than we are different, but our differences matter. So it's that fine balance, that proximity to people who don't look like you, who maybe didn't grow up like you. And it might be race, it might be socioeconomical, it might be religious, it might be whatever, right? There are many, many different areas where we can create better relationships based on just having that exposure and having it at a young age, instead of shielding our kids from it and pushing them towards people who look like them and do things like them and talk like them and walk like them. Being able to say, like, you and that kid, we're all going to go for ice cream after the baseball game is the foundation of having an appreciation for people who don't look like you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Agree.
Oh, yeah, Stephanie, definitely jump in. I was going to ask you, from your perspective, we've seen, I think we've seen a lot in the media about the, looting and rioting and then protesting. And, there's also petitions, there's different ways that people are reacting to, and so I would love to know from you kind of what you would like to see of, what's the next step? Like, where should we go now that everyone has sort of, or not everyone, but a lot of people are realizing that, maybe I'm doing something, either, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing, as much as I want to be doing, or I'm not as proactive as I want to be. From your perspective, what are some things that could be done, just in your own personal interactions as, a woman, a person of, in your society, in your community, that others can do either towards you, for you, or just to support, our culture?
I would say definitely a lot of the things you mentioned. So like signing the petition, having those hard talks. Like I've actually had talks with friends, and it's been really like definitely difficult. And I've been like really trying to be as like honest as possible, just so that they understand where I'm coming from. Because I also had the conversations with my coworkers. Even I work for Australia company, and they don't really know US history. So like they were like, what's up with the looting and what's up with all the damages that were being done, even to your own people and everything. And I was like, honestly, like, we tried everything else, and sometimes like you can't really tell us how to relieve that anger and everything. So like I understand why people are doing that. Obviously we don't want that to be the main focus for everybody to focus on. So I am bringing up those conversations because I did go to a multiple protest in my area, and actually having conversations with people that I was surrounded with, just telling them, like, hey, there's a reason why we're upset. And it's not just because a couple people are just like hating and saying racial slurs. Like, it's way deeper than that and everything. And I definitely always try to tell people, point people in the direction of watching like 13th, look into what we have had in the past too. We've had all these amazing, beautiful Black communities that have been destroyed, and we need to get back to that. And like supporting Black owned businesses, I think has been like really huge. Also, your vote is your dollar. So like not supporting any of the businesses that are using prison labor is like a huge thing for me. I have not been like supporting, like the Targets and everything else that use prison labor. Victoria's Secrets does too. So I've been like trying to educate people on like your vote is your dollar too. Like you may not necessarily be a slave owner, but you are, and encouraging or putting your money towards these businesses that actually use free labor. So like calling representatives, having those hard talks, watching documentaries and everything, and just I know a lot of people have been like hating on checking in with their friends, but I think like saying, hey, let's go for a hike, or let's do some meditation, or hey, there's some free healing classes, like, do you want to go with it with me? I think those are really good because we need a lot of healing right now, especially when we're bombarded with all these images of all these people passing away or being murdered. Like that's been really hard for me to deal with, and seeing that all the time. And I've known about it, like I've always known about it, but like now it's like in my face. So I've been really trying to like say, hey, let's come together as a community. Even like in LA, they have free food, free organic food. So a lot of like coming together, I think is going to be really huge. Almost kind of like the Black Panthers. I know a lot of people don't like the Black Panthers, but like giving the free food, free education, just like building ourselves up, and then having the allies that come in that are like, hey, like I have money right now, I'll donate to a women's shelter, or I'll sign all the petitions, or I'll call all the officials to say, hey, we want justice for Breonna Taylor, because like she's still like nothing's happening with that. And that just makes me so sad as a woman of color, because I get so much like in my day to day, like I'm doing really well with my company, and I'm so thankful that my company gives me positions with higher I don't know what the right word is, but I'm a manager basically in my position. And like, I deal with a lot of just comments, people saying comments to me. I'm in San Diego. I got called the N-word last year going to my account. I've been called stupid. I've been, like things, just being a woman, just trying to do my job. And it's a very manly, masculine profession. So usually I'm like one of the few handful of women. So I just have to hear all these things that men talk about too. So like not only just being a woman that is a Black woman of color, but also just being a woman, like the things that we deal with. So like just educating people on your story like we are right now. And thank you, Emily, for allowing us to share that, and just like realizing like there could be similarities. I know people have felt, like people are getting divorced. So I know people have felt that and how hard that could be. So like just relating to what we have to say, but also like being excited to learn more and to appreciate our culture so much more, and sticking up for our culture and coming together and not letting the government divide us, because that's what they want. We need to come together because love is the answer, really.
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of great points, that there's various ways that, anyone watching this can do something. So number one, just be a good human being. There are things that you can educate yourself on if you feel like you've had, maybe some thoughts or, kind of some issues around this conversation, or the conversation is hard. Like Emily mentioned, you have some trouble saying the word Black, or, talking about racism with your children or your family. There's a lot of resources and there's ways to educate yourself on those conversations. And you can go all the way up to, supporting Black businesses, like you mentioned, or going to watch movies about Black culture, kind of getting yourself in that realm, buying Black dolls, like Dorian mentioned, having those things around you that your kid can see, so that it's not just all one shade, everywhere. Read books that have characters of different people. So there's different ways, kind of starting with easy and going all the way up to more difficult, if you want to, kind of start and kind of immerse yourself in this conversation and to, know more about what's going on. So Dorian, I would love to kind of conclude with any kind of final thoughts. Just how are you feeling with all of this going on, and kind of what are you pulling away that maybe is positive from all of this conversation and talk?
Yeah, I want to just add on to what Stephanie said in response to your last question with a couple more things, because I've been on a couple of these calls at this point, and I've kind of synthesized my thoughts on it. Couple of things. One, vote, right? Like, go vote. Exercise your right. That's your number one way to make change. But don't just vote every 4 years. Vote in your primaries, vote in your local elections, because those are the people who make decisions. And don't just vote off of the party lines. Like, actually read how people vote as your representative, read what people stand for, read what their platforms are, because you can get duped, right? And so you want to make sure that you're educated when you go to the polls, but exercise that right. Additionally, I liked that Stephanie mentioned reaching out to your friends, like your Black friends, your friends of color, but not for the purpose of them educating you, right? Like, it is just, if you're a white person watching this or somebody in the majority, it has been an exhausting month for Black people in America and worldwide. It has been an exhausting month. And to answer your question, Rachel, I have lost a lot of sleep. I have been more of an insomnia. I'm a sleeper. Like, I love sleep. And I find myself up at 3:00 in the morning, scrolling social media, reading information, reading articles, searching for things, just because I want to have my arms wrapped around every bit of this as I can. And so to understand that it is emotionally taxing, it is physically taxing when you're not getting any sleep, to go through this as somebody in America, like Rachel, you have 2 sons, I have 2 Black nephews, and all I can think about is, what is society going to look like 10 to 15 years from now when they start to drive and go out on their own and go to college and do things themselves. And I know you obviously have those same concerns. But, for people who don't spend their nights thinking about that stuff, spend your time educating yourself, right? Like, that's my hope for this, is that people can educate themselves. There is more than enough information out there, right? For you to educate yourself, for you to understand why people are struggling as much as they are, and how can you actually make a difference. Be seen, be visible, and then intercede when there aren't Black people around, right? So to me, that's one of the biggest ways that you can show support. It's cool for my friends to stick up for me when I'm standing right there, because less people are going to say stuff like, Stephanie, I'm sorry that you had that experience last year where you were called the things that you were. So there's a lower percentage chance that that's going to happen with us in the room. If that happens with us in the room, like, yes, it happens, but it's not the norm, right? The norm is when we're not in the room and people say those things anyway, right? And if you don't say anything about it, or people express how they feel, they express their thoughts. Like, I recently read an article about a police officer whose his radio feed was being audited as like a regular audit. And he basically said he hopes we have a civil war because he just bought an assault rifle and he thinks that's the only way to essentially wipe Black people out. And he's on the radio with other cops and they don't say anything, right? Like, that is the moment. That's the time where you get to actually make change, because you're in a conversation with somebody who obviously has some level of respect for you, right? And you have some sort of rapport to be able to influence their perspective and change how they think, or even just shut it down so that it doesn't spread, right? Hate spreads as fast as love spreads. And being able to intercede in those moments where there aren't Black people around to stand up for themselves is one of is a great way for white people to show their allyship, right? And it's more than just posting on your social media and then forgetting about it until this happens all over again, right? It's an everyday thing. You know, you see somebody in Walmart saying something not appropriate or not kind to the cashier or to the person who's greeting them or whatever. Like, those are opportunities. There are opportunities every single day to show that you stand with the Black community and communities of color. And that's one super simple. It's free, right? It's easy. It takes a little bit of courage, but the more you do it, the better you'll get. So to me, that's kind of something that I'm hoping to see a lot more of, and will hopefully help me sleep a little bit better at night and be able to know that we're moving in a direction of policy change, but also like social and cultural change as well.
Great. Good. Thank you so much for bringing all of that up from, just from, straight up from a Black woman's perspective. How are we perceiving these things, and, what can those who want to be allies do to kind of support us and help us. And so kind of to wrap up, I'd love to know, Emily, from your perspective, some of the positive things that you're taking away from this whole conversation. And, I know that you are making it, an effort to use your platform to uplift voices and to allow others to kind of have that chance to talk, and then to use, the voice that you have as well. I'd love to know any kind of positive things that you're taking away.
Well, I just want to first say thank you all for being so brave and having this conversation on Brave Talks. Today, I was on the beach with my husband and my son, Ollie, and I was just imagining Ollie growing up, going to these kids' surf camps that were starting. We were there early before the sun rose, and it was so beautiful, and these kids start trickling out on the beach, and one by one, they're all white. They're all white, they're all white. Then another surf camp comes up, they're all white, they're all white. And I remember last year asking one of the moms, what does it cost to do the surf camp? Because like, I'm sending my kid there as soon as he can swim. I need mama time. And it was like $550 for, I don't know, 2 weeks every day, Monday through Friday. I'm just coming up with whatever it was. Mm-hmm. Camp. Right? So camp is expensive. It's cost prohibitive. And I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina. There's a large Black community here. Not one Black kid was in the surf camps. And so in that moment, there must have been 100 kids on the beach. Not one kid that I imagine had a scholarship, I'm assuming, had a scholarship to be a part of this program. And so I'm standing there thinking, we've got to make a change. Like, I don't want my son ever being a part of this, like, very homogenous group where he's not able to learn from other cultures and, have a diverse friendship group. And so we made a decision that we were going to give 2 kids scholarships to Black children in the community, scholarships to surfing classes. But then I hear Dorian saying, I don't want to get my hair wet, so maybe they want to do like science class or something, and I'm cool with that. But like, as a mom, recognizing that, how do I want my child to grow up, and how do I want our children to grow up, realizing and recognizing that they're equal and that they need to support each other and that they can learn from each other. And, I feel like privilege can be a great equalizer as well. And, like, I can use that to say, hey, accountability check, like Dorian was saying, have a little courage and say, this is a Christian surf camp you're running. And like, there are plenty houses of faith downtown that their children could use an outlet like this. And the children here at camp could benefit from it too. Like, it's great for everyone. And so like, what I've taken away from this conversation is really like, my action is, as a mama, to speak up and to try and equalize that with the privilege that I've been afforded. And so I'm just so grateful that to hear these stories, and I know they're just awful. It's terrible to think that Stephanie, you recalled those words, and one thing you didn't mention is you were at a Black Lives Matter peaceful protest, and a white man pulled out a shotgun, and you got in front of your son, and like, I have no words for that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine someone pulling out a shotgun in front of my son, even if I wasn't at like a White Lives Matter peaceful protest. Like, you know, I can't imagine even seeing a gun, and to have that as a threat, like, and to have it as a daily threat. And Dorian, you're like not being able to sleep because you're constantly trying to embrace this moment and learn, like, you know, not educate everyone. And you know, I apologize because I know I put this on your plate too, but you know, I'm very grateful that you're sharing these experiences. And for Rachel, just being a mom of 2 with a full-time job and taking the time to host this and be present has just been so touching to me. So gratitude, and gratitude for all 3 of you, for the entire BIPOC community, and I, you know, forever, and teach my son that he can have these conversations, and he can be the one at camp saying, hey, like, why are there no Black children here? Or why, you know, why is our district redlining? And why is our school all white? And, you know, so it's just so important for me to embrace that. Thank you for empowering me and educating me to feel confident enough to begin that journey, and to be the lamp for my son, and show him that he can do it as well.
Great. I love all of that. And thank you again for having us all here. I think, you know, there's so many different ways we could take this. This could probably be, you know, a 10 series thing, you know, just because there's so many different, you know, different parts of it. I mean, there's the beautiful history of Black people, and then there's, you know, what's going on now. So kind of going through that history and then bringing it up to today, there's just definitely a lot to talk about. So yeah, thank you so much for having us all on.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Much love to every single one of you. Huge virtual hug. Have a great day. Take care. Enjoy your quarantining.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching Brave Talks. I am looking forward to hearing your comments in the section below. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel and like it if you enjoyed this show. Take care, and I'll see you next week.